Hey, Springs Lighthouse, it's Pastor Brian. I had a couple of quick words of encouragement for you to consider as you go through your day. I was reading in Judges chapter 6, verse 24, and it tells us that Gideon built an altar to the Lord, and he named that altar Yahweh Shalom, or God is Peace. Most of us are familiar with Gideon, a little bit anyway, because he was the man who put the fleeces out before the Lord. But in those earlier times when God was first beginning to call Gideon, and it was a pretty supernatural, miraculous calling, God actually appeared to him as the angel of the Lord and called him a mighty man of valor. What's really interesting to me in looking at the life of Gideon is that God calls him a mighty man of valor while he is actually in a winepress hiding from the enemies. And all of Gideon's story in the book of Judges, which takes about 3 or 4 chapters, is a reiteration of the struggle that Gideon had in trusting the Lord to accomplish through him what God had already promised to accomplish through him. Kind of sounds like us sometimes, doesn't it? We struggle. We want to trust. In our minds we trust, but sometimes when it comes right down to it in our hearts, we wrestle. And in those days before Gideon actually went and was successful in that battle, even at the very beginning of his calling, he has this encounter with the Lord. He brings out food and drink for the Lord. And even that was part of Gideon testing to see who exactly it was that was putting this call in his life. But Gideon's struggle, when you come right down to it, had to do with this reality. Gideon couldn't see who God was preparing him to be because he was so focused on who he was at that moment. So in that moment of trial and testing and struggle, Gideon saw clearly his deficiencies, his lack, his inability to trust in what God wanted to do. Whereas God saw far beyond the end of the struggle. He saw it all accomplished. He saw the work completed. And not just the work in dealing with that struggle. He saw complete the work he wanted to do in Gideon as Gideon walked through that struggle. We're engaged in a struggle. This is a time unlike anything that most of us have ever dealt with in our lives. It's a struggle. It's difficult. God is asking us to trust him, to place our faith in him, to cling to him. But it's a struggle, isn't it? It's not a struggle as to who God is. It's a struggle as to who we are. And we see our inability to trust in the Lord sometimes. God says, I see you completed. I see the trust I am going to build in you. We need to come to that place where we are at peace with what God is doing. That's where Gideon needed to be able to place his faith and trust in God, to cling to the Lord so that he would know as he built that altar, God is peace. He doesn't just bring peace, he is peace. The closer we're walking with him, the more we will find peace, even in the midst of our struggle. Bless you guys. We'll talk again soon.